Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we are going to be talking about conscious spending.
Ooh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
we're going to be trying to figure out how to spend money on purpose
Love that.
rather than by accident.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is something that is pretty relevant to everybody. I
Absolutely.
think everybody listening to this has
It's
probably,
universal.
yeah,
Yeah.
has probably made at least a couple purchases in their life that they regretted.
At least a couple.
Especially with the rise of online shopping and the ease of purchasing things with one click.
Oh my gosh, one click, yeah.
And so to kind of dive deeper into this topic, we have brought on an expert.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So I guess to kind of start off, let's talk a little bit about what exactly we mean by conscious spending, because it can be kind of a nebulous term and it means different things to different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the way that I like to think about it is really being intentional about where your money is going, rather than just kind of, like you were saying, spending it by accident. So really having a plan,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what your values are,
Okay.
and aligning your spending with those values.
So not necessarily saying like never spend money on anything fun or frivolous or whatever,
No, absolutely not.
because that's not realistic for most people.
Yeah, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And, money is a tool and it should be used to enjoy your life,
Right.
but being thoughtful about how you do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think a lot of times people think about finances as just this like spreadsheet and like numbers, and it's like
Right.
really dry and boring, and
It doesn't have to be.
it doesn't have to be. But it really is, like you're saying, like a tool to kind of live the life that you want.
Absolutely.
And so if you're not intentional about that and you're not making conscious decisions with your money,
Yeah.
then by default, you're probably not going to end up where you want to be.
You're letting other people decide
Yeah.
where your money goes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You're letting Amazon or Target or whoever else decide where that money goes.
You're letting your emotions
Yeah.
decide.
So then I guess that kind of brings us to the next question, which is like, why is this so hard? Like, why is it so hard to actually spend our money on purpose? Because I think, intellectually, most people would probably agree with
Yeah.
a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually putting it into practice,
Right.
it can be a lot harder than it seems.
Well, I think a big part of it is all the marketing that we're bombarded with these days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every time you open your phone, every time you turn on the TV,
Turn on the computer,
you
scroll through any social media feed.
absolutely, you're being inundated with ads
Yeah.
that are designed to trigger your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
to make you feel like you need this thing right now.
Yeah. Well, they're not really designed to make you feel like you need it right now. They're
Right.
designed to make you.
That is their goal, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make you think that you need it.
Yeah.
And they're very good at it.
Yeah, to create this sense of urgency or
Yeah.
this sense of scarcity.
Absolutely.
And all these psychological tricks to get you to actually click that buy button.
And we're just not equipped to deal with that constant barrage
Yeah.
of marketing messages.
And I think too, like it plays into our instant gratification society that we live in,
Yes.
where we can get pretty much anything we want.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Like same-day delivery now.
Yeah.
It's insane.
So I think it's like training us to kind of just expect that everything should be instant. And so when we see something that we want,
Yeah.
even if it's not something we actually need or even really truly want, it's just like, well, I can have it right now, so why not just buy it?
Why not? Yeah.
And then we end up regretting it later.
Right.
But it can be hard to resist that in the moment.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, like, what are some of the common things that you see that like really get people? Like, what are some of those triggers that marketers use?
Scarcity.
Okay.
Like limited time only.
don't let them stop.
Oh, yeah. You better hurry. This deal ends at midnight.
Right. Or so many people are buying this right now.
Oh, yeah. Social proof is a big one.
Right. The fear of missing out.
FOMO. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like, those personalized ads that we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
that really creepily know exactly what you've been looking at?
It's like they're reading your mind.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes those ads are so good.
Well, they're getting better and better
They are, yeah.
with AI and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's scary good. Yeah.
That it's like, oh, yeah, I do need that.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know I needed it, but they've convinced me.
And, they're very good at appealing to our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're feeling stressed or anxious.
Yeah. Retail therapy.
Yeah. You might be more susceptible to buying something.
Treat yourself.
Right. As a way to kind of soothe yourself.
Yeah, or even just boredom. Like, I know a lot of people just, like, mindlessly scroll.
Oh, yeah.
And then they end up buying stuff they don't need just because they're bored.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, the first step is awareness.
Okay.
So now that we know...
You're thy enemy.
Right, exactly. Now that we know the tactics that marketers are using, we can start to be more mindful of them.
Okay.
And so the next time you see an ad that's trying to trigger you,
Yeah.
you can take a step back and say, wait a minute.
Is this really something I need?
Yeah. Am I being manipulated here?
Or is this just clever marketing?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like taking a pause.
Yeah, the pause button.
The pause button.
It's so powerful.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And so then I guess the question is like, okay, so we take a pause.
Yeah.
But then what? Like, how do we actually make those decisions?
Okay.
Like, how do we decide what's worth spending our money on and what's not?
I think it goes back to your values.
Okay.
So thinking about...
Yeah. That seems to be like a common thread.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is the foundation.
Okay.
So thinking about what's important to you in your life, and then making sure that your spending aligns with those values.
That's something that we need to figure out first is like,
Okay.
what are my values?
Yeah.
And then how does my spending reflect that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So for example, if you value experiences
Okay.
over material possessions, then you might be more likely to spend your money on travel
Okay.
or concerts or things like that,
Okay.
rather than buying a bunch of clothes or gadgets.
Makes sense.
So it's really about being intentional about where your money is going
Okay.
and making sure that it's supporting the life that you want to live.
So it's not just about like, don't spend money or spend less money. It's
Yes.
about spend money on the right things.
Yeah, on the things that are important to you.
The things that are aligned with your values.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So then I guess the next step is like, okay, I figured out what my values are. How do I actually put that into practice? Like, how do I actually make sure that I'm spending in alignment with those values?
Well, I think a big part of it is just being aware of your spending habits.
Okay.
So tracking your expenses, seeing where your money is going.
To just be mindful of it.
Yes. And a lot of people are afraid to do that.
Oh, yeah, they don't want to know.
They don't want to look.
Ignorance is bliss.
Right. But it's so important.
Yeah, because you can't
Yeah.
fix something if you don't know it's broken.
Exactly.
So you got to kind of face the music,
Yeah.
figure out where your money is going, and then you can start to make changes from there.
And you might be surprised at what you find.
Yeah, like those little subscriptions that you forgot about.
Oh, yeah.
Or that daily coffee habit that adds up more than you thought.
Yeah, it can be eye-opening.
Yeah, and so once you kind of have that awareness, then you can start to say, okay, where do I want to make changes?
What are my priorities?
Yeah, are there areas where I'm overspending?
Right.
Are there areas where I could cut back
Absolutely.
without sacrificing my quality of life?
Right. Or even improving it.
Or even improving it, yeah.
Yeah, because
But
sometimes
sometimes you're spending money on things that,
you're not even enjoying.
yeah. And so if you can cut back on those things and then reallocate that money to something that you do enjoy,
Yeah.
or that's more in alignment with your values,
That brings you joy.
then that's a win-win.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, like when you work with people on this, what are some of the common things that they're surprised by?
I think the biggest surprise is usually how much they're spending on things that they don't even really care about.
Okay.
Like I said, the subscriptions,
Mm-hmm.
eating out impulse
Yes.
purchases.
Especially like that daily coffee,
Yeah.
or like you said, like eating out, like those things that you don't really think about
Yeah.
in the moment, but then when you add it up over the course of a month or a year,
It's shocking.
it's like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money.
And it could have been used for something else.
Yeah.
Something more meaningful.
Yeah. And so I guess like a lot of people are probably listening to this and thinking like, okay, this all sounds great, but I'm already stressed out about money.
Right.
I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
I don't know where to even start.
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. So what would you say to those people?
Well, I would say just start small.
Okay.
You don't have to do everything at once.
You don't have to boil the ocean.
But pick one thing
Okay.
that you want to focus on.
So like maybe it's tracking your expenses
Yeah.
for a month.
Absolutely.
Or maybe it's like making a list of your values.
Yes.
And then just kind of see how your spending aligns with those values.
Just start somewhere
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
pick one small thing
and build from there
and build from there.
and celebrate those small wins.
Celebrate the small wins. I like that.
Yeah, because it can be easy to get discouraged if you feel like you're not making progress.
Because it does take time.
Yeah, it's a journey.
It's not like a one and done.
No.
And it's not about perfection either.
No.
It's about progress.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just making those small changes over time.
Yeah, and be patient with yourself.
Yeah, and be patient with yourself.
It takes time to build new habits, but it's so worth it.
Okay, so we've talked about, you know, the importance of conscious spending.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of the challenges, some of the things that make it hard,
Right.
and some tips for getting started.
Yes.
So now I want to get a little bit more practical
Right.
and talk about some specific strategies
Yeah.
that people can use to actually implement this in their lives.
Great.
And so one of the things that we talked about earlier was that pause button,
The pause button.
which I think is such a great analogy because it really is about just taking a moment
Yes.
to step
Right.
back
Breathe.
before you buy.
Yeah, before you click that buy button.
Right. And I think especially with online shopping,
Oh my gosh.
it's so easy to just be like, oh, this looks cool. I'll just buy it.
One click and it's done.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
But if you can just take a moment to pause
Yeah.
and say, okay, do I really need this?
Right. Do I even want this?
What is this going to add to my life?
Yeah.
Can I afford this?
How will I feel about this purchase tomorrow
Or a week from now.
or a month from now?
Or a year from now.
Yeah. Because sometimes that initial excitement wears off pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and then you're stuck with something that you don't even really want.
Yeah. Buyer's remorse.
Buyer's remorse.
That's the worst.
Yeah,
So the pause button is a great way to kind of avoid that.
absolutely.
And so I'm curious, like, what are some other practical tips
Here's
that
Ken.
people can use to kind of implement that pause button in their lives?
Well, one thing you could do is set a rule for yourself,
Okay.
like a 24-hour rule.
Okay.
So if you see something that you want to buy,
Mm-hmm.
don't buy it right away.
Mm.
Wait 24 hours.
Give it a day.
Yeah, give it a day
Sleep.
and see if you still want it tomorrow.
Okay.
And chances are you won't.
Yeah. Or if you do, then maybe it's something that's actually worth buying.
Right, because if you're still thinking about it
Yeah.
a day later,
Then maybe it is something that
it might be a genuine want or need.
Yeah, it's not just a fleeting impulse.
Right.
Okay. I like that. What are some other strategies?
Another thing you can do is unsubscribe from all those tempting email lists
Oh, yeah.
or catalogs.
So you're not constantly being bombarded.
Right, because that's just fuel for the impulse purchases.
Yeah, and I think too, like, muting notifications on your phone
Yeah.
can be really helpful
Absolutely.
because every time you get that little ding,
Oh, yeah.
it's like, ooh, what's that?
Yeah, what's on sale now?
And then you're like sucked into that vortex
It's so easy to get sucked in.
of online shopping.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think just kind of creating those boundaries
absolutely set those boundaries.
for yourself can be really helpful.
And, I've heard people talk about digital detoxing,
Oh, yeah.
like taking a break from social media
Yeah.
or even just your phone in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be really helpful for conscious spending as well.
Yeah, because it kind of breaks that cycle of,
Absolutely.
constantly being bombarded with stuff to buy.
It gives you a chance to reset
Yeah.
and reconnect with what's really important.
Exactly. And so it's not necessarily saying like never use social media or never shop online.
No.
It's just being mindful of how much time you're spending
Yeah.
on those things
Set those boundaries.
and making sure that it's not
Yeah,
taking over your life.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so what about when you actually do need to shop?
Yeah.
Like, how do you avoid those impulse buys?
Make a list
Okay.
and stick to it.
Okay. So don't just browse.
No browsing,
No.
especially not those end caps.
Oh, yeah. Those end caps are dangerous.
Yeah, they're designed to tempt you.
Yeah.
So just go in.
Get in, get out.
Yeah. Get what you need and get out.
Okay. And so online,
Yeah.
obviously you're probably going to be browsing a little bit more.
Right.
But what are some tips for navigating that world?
Well, I think it's helpful to use tools
Okay.
like browser extensions that can help you compare prices
Oh, yeah.
or find coupons.
Mm-hmm.
And also just being mindful of the tactics that we talked about earlier.
So being aware of
Yeah.
those scarcity tactics,
Absolutely.
the social proof,
Yeah.
those things that are designed to kind of trigger you.
Trigger you. Yeah.
And then also just like taking a moment to step back,
Yeah. Breathe before you buy.
before you buy and say, okay, is this really something I need? Can I afford this?
The line with my value.
Does it align with my values?
Yeah.
Okay, and so another thing that I think a lot of people struggle with
Yeah.
is kind of that balance between saving for the future
Yes.
and enjoying life in the present.
Right.
Because it's like, you want to be responsible. You want to have that financial security,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to just like,
Deprive yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
live like a monk
Right.
and like never do anything fun.
Exactly.
So how do you find that balance?
Budget for joy.
Okay.
So allocate a percentage of your income specifically for enjoyment,
Okay.
for things that bring you joy.
Okay, so it's not just about like saving every penny.
No.
It's
no.
about,
You got to enjoy life.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so that's something that you would actually like put into your budget.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're creating your budget,
Yeah.
you would say, okay, this much is for rent.
Yeah.
This much is for bills.
Yeah.
This much is for groceries.
Yep.
And this much is for fun.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah, and that
Because then you don't feel guilty
right,
when you actually spend money on something fun.
because you've already planned for it.
Yeah, it's in the budget.
You've given yourself permission
Exactly.
to enjoy it.
Okay, so then I guess the question is like, how do you actually figure out those percentages? Like,
Yeah, wow.
how much should you be saving?
Mm-hmm.
How much should you be spending on fun? Like,
Yeah.
what's the magic formula?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer
Okay.
because everyone's situation is different.
Right.
But there are some general guidelines
Okay.
that you can use as a starting point.
Okay.
And one popular method is the 50-30-20 rule.
Oh, okay, I've heard of that.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah, so tell me more about that.
Yeah, so basically it's allocating 50% of your income towards needs,
Okay.
30% towards wants,
Okay.
and 20% towards savings and debt repayment.
Okay, so needs being like your essential expenses.
Your rent, utilities,
Good.
groceries, transportation,
Okay.
all that good stuff.
So those are the things that you absolutely have to pay for.
Yeah. You got to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
You got to have a roof over your head.
Yeah.
You got to eat.
Okay. And then wants being like
The fun stuff.
the fun stuff.
Like entertainment.
Travel, trappies.
All those things that bring you joy,
Okay.
but aren't strictly necessary
Okay.
for survival.
Okay, so that's 30%.
Yeah.
And then 20% for savings and debt repayment.
Yeah. So building that emergency fund,
Okay.
paying down any debt that you might have,
Okay.
investing for the future.
So this is like future you.
Yeah, future you will thank you.
Future you will thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good framework.
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
That's a good starting point.
But again, it's not set in stone.
Okay.
You might need to adjust those percentages.
So if you have a lot of debt,
Right.
you might need to allocate more to debt repayment.
Absolutely.
If you are
Yeah.
living in a high cost of living area,
Yeah,
you might have to allocate more towards needs.
exactly.
So it's really about
Yeah.
figuring out what works best for you,
Customizing it to your situation.
customizing it to your own personal situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. And then so what about like the good old-fashioned envelope system?
Oh, yeah, the envelope system.
I feel like that's something that's kind of like making a comeback.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
It works.
So for those who aren't familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
can you kind of explain how that works?
Yeah. So basically, you take your cash
Okay.
and you divide it up into different envelopes
Okay.
for different spending categories.
So like an envelope for groceries, an
Yeah.
envelope for entertainment,
Yep.
an envelope for gas.
Transportation. Yep.
Okay.
And
So whatever your categories are.
Right.
And so then when you go to spend money in that category,
Mm-hmm.
you only use the cash from that envelope.
Right.
And so once the cash is gone,
You're done.
you're done.
You got to wait until the next month.
Or until you get paid again or whatever.
Right.
Okay, and so what's the benefit of doing that?
Well, it makes your spending more tangible
Okay. Yeah.
because you can actually see the money dwindling
Okay.
as you spend it.
Yeah. It's not just like a number on a screen.
Right. Yeah. Which can feel very abstract.
Yeah, and I think too, like it kind of forces you to make those decisions
Right.
in the moment.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, do I really need this?
yeah. Is this worth it?
Or should I save this cash for something else?
Yeah.
Okay, and so what about in our increasingly digital world?
Yeah.
Are there any apps or tools that can kind of help with that same concept?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are tons of great budgeting apps out there
Okay.
that can help you track your spending,
Mm-hmm.
set budgets, and even automate your savings.
Okay, and so what are some of the apps that you recommend?
I like Mint.
Oh, okay, I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
it's a very popular one.
Yeah.
And then there's also YNB.
YNB.
Yeah.
What's that stand for?
You need a budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Straightforward.
Straightforward, yeah.
Okay.
And that one is really cool because it focuses on giving every dollar a job.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. So you're actually signing every dollar that you earn to a specific purpose.
Okay, so it's like this dollar is going to rent, this dollar is going to groceries,
Yeah.
this dollar is going to fun.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's really interesting.
It's a really cool way to think about budgeting.
And so I guess with these apps,
Yeah.
you're basically tracking your expenses digitally
Yeah.
rather than with physical envelopes.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so then what are some other methods that people might want to consider?
Well, there's also something called reverse budgeting.
Reverse budgeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is that?
So instead of starting by allocating money to various spending categories.
Mm-hmm.
You prioritize your savings goals first.
Okay.
So you figure out how much you want to save each month,
Okay.
and then you automate that.
Okay.
So that money is automatically transferred
Okay.
to your savings account.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then whatever's left over
Mm-hmm.
is your spending money.
Okay. I see. So it's kind of like flipping the script.
Right. On traditional budgeting.
Exactly.
Okay. And so what's the benefit of doing it that way?
Well, it ensures that you're actually hitting your savings goals
Okay.
because you're prioritizing them
Okay.
right from the start.
So you're not just like, oh, whatever's left over, I'll save.
Right, because usually there's nothing left over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a really interesting approach.
It's a really powerful way to think about it.
Yeah. And so I guess no matter what system you use,
Yeah.
whether it's the envelope system,
Yeah.
an app,
Yeah.
reverse budgeting,
Whatever works for you.
yeah, it seems like the key is to actually track your spending.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because otherwise,
Yeah, you're just guessing.
you're just guessing.
Yeah.
You're like, I think I'm spending about this much on groceries,
Right.
but I don't really know.
And you're probably wrong.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people are resistant to that
Yeah.
because it feels tedious.
It can be tedious.
It can be tedious.
Yeah.
It can be time consuming.
But it's so worth it.
It is, because it gives you that awareness
Yeah.
that you need to make changes.
And it could be really eye-opening
Oh,
to
yeah.
actually see
Yeah,
where
it's
your
something-
money is going.
It can be shocking sometimes.
Yeah. And so then I guess once you have that awareness,
Yeah.
the next step is like, okay, how do I actually change my behavior?
Right.
How do I move from awareness to action?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think things get really interesting
Yeah,
because
it's not just about the numbers.
right.
It's about understanding the why behind your spending.
Okay, the psychology of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about marketing tactics
Mhm.
and emotional triggers,
Yeah.
but there's also the deeper layer of your values and priorities.
Okay, so we've kind of touched on that a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth diving deeper into.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of people hear align your spending with your values and they're like, okay, that sounds great,
Yeah.
but how do I actually do that? Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
So let's break that down a little bit.
Okay.
So first of all, how do you even figure out what your values are?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's a process of self-reflection.
Okay.
And there are a lot of different ways to do it.
Okay.
But some questions that you can ask yourself
Yeah.
are, what brings me joy?
Okay.
What kind of impact do I want to have on the world?
Mhm.
What are my long-term aspirations?
So it's not just about like, what do I want to buy today? It's about like,
It's bigger than that.
what do I want my life to look like
Yeah,
in the long run?
exactly.
Okay.
And what are the things that are important to me?
Okay. And so once you have a better sense of your values,
Yeah.
how do you actually start to align your spending with those values?
Well, I think it starts with just being aware of your spending habits.
Okay.
So like we talked about before,
Tracking your expenses.
yeah, tracking your expenses
Okay.
and then looking at those expenses through the lens of your values.
Asking yourself, yeah,
Does this purchase
does this purchase reflect
align with my values?
my values?
Okay, and if not,
Yeah.
what can I do differently?
Right. What changes can I make?
Okay, so for example,
Yeah.
let's say someone values sustainability,
Okay.
but they realize that they're spending a lot of money on fast fashion,
Right.
which is not very sustainable.
Yeah.
So what could they do differently?
Well, they could start by reducing their consumption of fast fashion.
Okay.
Maybe buying fewer items,
Uh,
but investing in higher quality pieces
Okay.
that will last longer.
So it's kind of like a quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they could also look for sustainable brands
Wow.
that are using eco-friendly materials.
So making those conscious choices.
Yes.
Even if it means spending a little bit more upfront.
Yeah. Sometimes it's worth it
Okay.
to invest in something that aligns with your values.
Okay. And so I think that's a really good example of how you can kind of start to see those connections.
Between your values and your spending
Absolutely.
and make those shifts. But
Yeah.
I imagine it's not always easy.
No.
Like, what happens when you have multiple values
Yeah.
that maybe conflict with each other?
Right.
Or what happens when your values conflict with your desires? Like,
Right.
for example, let's say someone values experiences and travel,
Okay.
but they also love shopping for clothes.
Okay.
Like, how do they find that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
And I think the key is to prioritize.
Okay.
So thinking about which values are most important to you
Okay.
and then making sure that your spending reflects those priorities.
Okay, so in that example,
Yeah,
maybe they would decide that travel is more important to them than
right.
shopping for clothes.
Absolutely.
And so they would allocate more of their budget towards travel
Yeah.
and maybe cut back on their clothing budget.
Exactly.
Or maybe they would find a way to combine those two passions. Yeah. Like maybe they would travel to a place where they could shop for unique clothing items
There you go.
or something like that.
Yeah, so it's about being creative.
Yeah, finding those solutions that work for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so prioritizing is key.
Yes.
And then also being creative.
Yeah.
Finding those solutions that allow you to honor your values
Yes.
without feeling like you're depriving yourself.
Right, because it's not about deprivation.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where you can kind of have both.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important point because I think a lot of people think about conscious spending as being about like restriction
Yeah.
and deprivation.
Yeah.
But it's really not.
But about that.
It's about being intentional
Yes.
and making choices that align with what's important to you.
Exactly.
Okay, so another technique that I think is really helpful for this
Mm-hmm.
is visualization.
Ooh. Visualization.
I'm a big fan of visualization.
Okay.
So how can you use visualization to kind of help with this process?
Well, I think it's really helpful to create a vision board
Okay.
or a journal where you capture images and words
Okay.
that represent your aspirations.
Okay, so like your dream life.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when you're making spending decisions,
Mm-hmm.
you can refer back to that vision board
Okay.
and ask yourself,
Okay.
does this purchase support my vision?
Is this going to help me get closer to my goals?
Exactly.
Okay, and if not,
Yeah,
maybe it's something that you can let go of.
absolutely.
So it's like creating that tangible reminder
Yeah,
of what you're working towards.
it can be really powerful.
Yeah. And I think too, like when you have that clear vision in mind,
Yeah,
it makes it easier to say no to
absolutely.
those things that don't align with your vision.
Right, because you know what you're saying yes to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You have that bigger picture.
it gives you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of like kind of high level stuff, but I know some people are probably listening to this and thinking like, okay, this all sounds great, but I'm already struggling to make ends meet.
Right.
Like, how can I even think about conscious spending when I'm just trying to pay the bills?
Yeah, that's a really valid concern.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that conscious spending looks different for everyone.
Okay.
It's not about having a surplus of money.
Okay.
It's about making intentional choices
Okay.
with the resources that you have.
So even if you're on a tight budget,
Yeah.
you can still be a conscious spender.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so what are some tips for people who are in that situation?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to focus on reducing waste.
Okay.
So that could be food waste,
Okay.
energy waste,
Okay.
water waste,
Okay.
any kind of waste.
Okay. So just being more mindful of your consumption.
Yeah. And finding ways to reduce your consumption.
Okay. And that can actually save you money.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because you're not buying as much.
Yeah, you're not wasting as much.
You're not using as much.
Okay, so that's a good one.
Yeah.
What are some other tips?
Another tip is to find creative ways to save money on essentials.
Okay.
So that could be things like meal planning,
Okay.
shopping at discount grocery stores,
Okay.
buying in bulk,
Right.
negotiating your bills.
Okay, so just being more resourceful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finding those ways to stretch your dollars further.
Okay, and so then I think another thing that's important to remember
Yeah.
is that conscious spending is not just about saving money.
No.
It's also about spending money on things that align with your values.
Absolutely.
And so for someone who's on a tight budget,
Yeah.
that might mean prioritizing experiences over material possessions.
Yes.
So instead of buying a bunch of stuff,
Right.
maybe they would save up for a trip
Yeah.
or a concert
Or a nice meal out.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So finding those ways to enjoy life
Absolutely.
without breaking the bank.
Right.
Okay. And so I think all of this is really helpful information. But I think one of the biggest challenges that people face is staying motivated
Yes.
because it's easy to get excited about this stuff
Absolutely.
at first.
Yeah.
But then, life happens.
Right.
You get busy.
You get stressed.
You get tempted.
Yeah, those temptations are everywhere.
And so how do you stay on track?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to celebrate your wins.
Okay.
So every time you hit a savings goal
Yeah.
or you make a conscious spending decision,
Okay.
take a moment to acknowledge that
Okay.
and celebrate it.
So it doesn't have to be like a big celebration.
No, it could be something small,
Okay.
like buying yourself a coffee
Okay.
or taking a relaxing bath.
Okay. So just something to kind of reinforce that positive behavior.
Exactly.
Okay. What are some other tips for staying motivated?
Another tip is to find an accountability partner.
Okay.
So someone who you can share your goals with
Okay.
and who can support you along the way.
So like a friend,
Yeah, a friend, a family member,
a financial advisor.
a therapist.
Okay. So just someone who you can kind of check in with
Yeah,
and who can help you stay on track.
exactly. And they can celebrate your wins with you, too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what about when you're feeling discouraged?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do when you have a setback
Right.
or when you just feel like you're not making progress?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that setbacks are normal.
Okay.
Everyone has them.
Okay.
It's not about being perfect.
Okay.
It's about progress.
Progress over perfection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so when you do have a setback,
Mm-hmm.
don't beat yourself up about it.
Okay.
Just acknowledge it.
Okay.
Learn from it
Okay.
and move on.
Okay. And I think it's also helpful to have a plan
Yes.
for how you're going to deal with those setbacks.
Absolutely.
So, like, maybe you have a list of things that you can do
Yeah.
to kind of get back on track.
Right.
Or maybe you have a support system in place.
Yeah.
So you can reach out to someone when you're feeling discouraged.
It's so important to have that support
Yeah.
because it can be really tough to do this alone.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of strategies for staying motivated.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most powerful things is to remember why you're doing this.
Absolutely.
So what is your why?
Yeah. Why is conscious spending important to you?
Yeah. What are you hoping to achieve?
What are your goals?
Yeah. And I think when you have that clear sense of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it easier to stay on track
It does.
because you know that you're working towards something.
Yeah. You have something to strive for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to take some time to reflect on that
Absolutely.
and to really connect with your why.
Yeah. Because that's what's going to keep you going
Exactly.
when things get tough.
And so now I want to talk about some common spending challenges that I
Great.
think a lot of people face
Yeah.
and get your advice on how to overcome them.
Great.
So one of the biggest challenges, I think, is resisting online shopping temptations.
Oh, yeah.
Because like we talked about earlier,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's so easy to get caught up in that scroll and click cycle.
Yes. And those targeted ads
Yeah.
were getting so good.
Yeah, it's like they know exactly what you want
They're reading our minds.
before you even know you want it.
I swear.
So how do you fight back against that?
Well, I think the first step is to be aware of the tactics that marketers are using.
Okay, so we talked about that a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but it's worth repeating.
Absolutely.
So things like scarcity tactics,
Right.
social proof,
Right.
those things that are designed to kind of trigger that impulse buy.
Trigger you. Yeah.
And so once you're aware of those tactics,
Mhm.
you can start to see them coming.
Yeah.
And you can kind of resist them a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what are some other tips for resisting online shopping temptations?
Well, another tip is to unsubscribe from those tempting email lists.
Okay, we talked about that before,
Yeah.
but it's worth repeating because it's so easy to just get sucked in.
Yeah. You open your email and there's a sale.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I got to get that.
Yeah, and I think too, like a lot of times those emails are designed to make you feel like you're missing out.
Absolutely. FOMO.
FOMO, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like playing on those psychological triggers.
Exactly.
Okay, so unsubscribing from email lists.
Mm.
What are some other tips?
Another tip is to set a budget for online shopping.
Okay.
So just like you would budget for any other category,
Yeah.
allocate a certain amount of money
Okay.
that you're comfortable spending online each month.
Okay, and then once you hit that budget,
You're done.
you're done.
No more online shopping.
Okay, and so I guess that kind of goes back to the idea of having a plan
Yes,
and being intentional
absolutely.
with your spending.
It's all about being intentional.
Okay, so what about discount codes?
Ooh, discount codes.
Yeah.
They can be dangerous.
Yeah, because they make you feel like you're getting a good deal.
Right.
But are you really?
Yeah, it's the question.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to ask yourself,
Okay.
would I buy this even without the discount?
Okay.
If the answer is no,
Yeah.
then don't buy it.
Okay, so it's not really a deal.
It's not a deal if you wouldn't have bought it otherwise.
Yeah, it's just a way to get you to spend money.
Exactly.
Okay, so be wary of discount codes.
Yes. Be wary.
Okay, and then what about free shipping thresholds?
Ooh, those are dangerous too.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, if I just spend $10 more, I get free shipping.
I might as well.
So I might as well just add this to my cart.
Right.
And then you end up spending more money than you intended.
Exactly. And you end up with a bunch of stuff that you don't even need.
Yeah. So how do you avoid that trap?
Well, I think it's helpful to be aware of the free shipping threshold.
Okay.
And then, if you're close to it,
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself,
Okay.
is it worth it to add another item to my cart just to get free shipping?
Okay.
Or would I rather just pay for shipping and not buy something that I don't need?
Okay, so it's kind of like weighing the pros and cons
Yeah.
and making that conscious decision.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so then another challenge that I think a lot of people face
Yeah.
is balancing saving with enjoying life.
Right.
Because it's like you want to be responsible.
Yeah.
You want to have that financial security,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to just like,
Deprive yourself.
yeah, live like a monk
Right.
and never do anything fun.
Exactly.
So how do you find that balance?
Well, I think we talked about budgeting for joy earlier,
Oh, yeah.
and I think that's a really important part of it.
Okay.
So making sure that you're allocating a portion of your income
Okay.
towards things that bring you joy.
Okay.
And that could be anything.
Okay.
It could be travel.
Mm-hmm.
It could be hobbies.
Yeah.
It could be dining out.
Okay.
It could be anything that you enjoy.
Okay, so just making sure that you're not neglecting that part of your life.
Right, because it's important to have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also important to remember that you don't have to spend a lot of money to have fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are tons of free and low-cost activities.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, you could go for a walk in the park.
Okay.
You could have a picnic.
Okay.
You could go to the library.
Okay.
You could visit a museum.
Okay.
A lot of museums have free days.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
could volunteer.
Okay.
There are tons of ways to have fun.
Yeah, so it's about being creative.
Yeah.
And thinking outside the box.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then what about those times when you really want to treat yourself to something special,
Yeah.
but it feels like it's outside of your budget?
Right.
Like, what do you do in that situation?
Well, I think one option is to set a savings goal
Okay.
specifically for that treat.
Okay.
So let's say you really want to go on a vacation. Yeah.
But you don't have the money for it right now.
Right.
You could set a savings goal.
Yep.
And start putting aside a little bit of money each month
Absolutely.
until you reach your goal.
And that
Yeah.
way, it feels more attainable.
Okay, because you're breaking it down into
Yeah.
smaller chunks.
Exactly.
Okay, and so it's not just like, oh, I need to come up with $5,000.
Right.
It's like, okay, I need to save $100 a month,
Yeah.
which feels more manageable.
Exactly.
Okay, and then once you reach your goal,
Mhm.
you can enjoy that treat.
Guilt-free.
Guilt-free because you saved for it.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also important to remember that you don't have to wait until you reach your goal
Right.
to start enjoying life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you can still find ways to enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Celebrate those small wins along the way.
Exactly. And so I think that's a really important point because I think a lot of people think about like, okay, I'm going to save up for this big thing.
Right.
And then once I achieve that, then I'll be happy.
Right.
But it's like, no.
Yeah, you got to find joy in the process.
Yeah, you got to find joy in the everyday moments.
Yeah.
And so finding those ways to kind of sprinkle in those little joys
Yeah.
along the way can really help you stay motivated.
It does.
And so speaking of motivation,
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have a support system in place
Absolutely.
because this stuff can be hard.
It can.
Yeah, and so having people who you can talk to,
Yeah.
who can support you.
Yeah, who can relate to what you're going through
Yeah.
is so important.
So that could be friends,
Yeah.
family members, a financial advisor,
Absolutely.
a therapist,
This is
support group.
There are tons of resources out there.
Yeah, and so don't be afraid to reach out for help.
No, don't try to do this alone.
Yeah.
Because it's so much easier when you
Yeah.
have people supporting you.
And so I think another thing that can be really helpful
Mm-hmm.
is to find inspiration.
Ooh, inspiration.
So where do you find inspiration?
Well, I think there are a lot of great resources out there,
Okay.
like books,
Yeah.
podcasts,
Yeah.
articles,
Yeah.
blogs, social media accounts
Okay.
that are all about conscious spending.
Okay, so surrounding yourself with those positive messages
Yeah.
can be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I guess kind of the last thing I want to touch on is
Yeah.
the idea of mindset.
Ooh, mindset.
So because I think a lot of this comes down to mindset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what are some mindset shifts that you think are important for conscious spending?
Well, I think one of the most important mindset shifts is to move away from a scarcity mindset
Okay.
and towards an abundance mindset.
Okay, so what's the difference between those two?
So a scarcity mindset is the belief that there's not enough to go around,
Okay.
that you have to compete with others for resources,
Okay.
and that you have to hoard what you have.
Okay.
Whereas an abundance mindset is the belief that there's plenty for everyone,
Okay.
that there's enough to go around,
Okay.
and that you can create the life that you want.
Okay, so it's like a more positive outlook.
Yeah, it's about believing in yourself
And-
and believing in your ability to create the life that you want.
Okay. And so how do you actually shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance?
Well, I think it starts with gratitude.
Okay.
So focusing on the things that you're grateful for
Okay.
and appreciating what you already have.
Okay.
And then it's also about challenging your negative thoughts
Okay.
and replacing them with positive thoughts.
Okay, so like affirmations.
Yeah, affirmations are a great tool.
Okay.
And then it's also about taking action.
Okay.
So doing things that make you feel good
Okay.
and that help you to create the life that you want.
Okay, so it's like a combination of those things.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of people think about mindset as being like just thinking positive thoughts,
Yeah.
but it's really not enough.
No, you got to take action.
You got to take action. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a really important point.
Absolutely.
And so I guess kind of the last thing I want to ask you about
Yeah.
is the idea of gift giving,
Ooh, gift giving.
because I think that can be a really challenging area.
It can be.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to be a conscious spender.
Right.
Because you know you want to be generous, you want to show your loved ones that you care,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to break the bank or
Right.
buy them a bunch of stuff that they don't need.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that?
Well, I think the key is to shift your focus
Okay.
from material possessions
Okay.
to meaningful gestures.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, it could mean giving experiences,
Okay.
like tickets to a concert,
Yeah.
or a cooking class,
Okay.
or a weekend getaway.
Okay.
Or it could mean giving homemade gifts,
Okay.
or giving donations to a charity in the recipient's name.
Okay, so it's about being thoughtful
Yes.
and intentional
Absolutely.
with your gift giving.
It's not about the money.
Yeah.
It's about the thought
Yeah.
and the love behind it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good way to wrap up this part of our conversation because it really kind of brings it all together.
It does. It's
Yeah.
about being intentional.
Yeah.
It's about being thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's about being creative.
Yeah.
And it's about finding joy.
Finding joy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so before we move on to the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to just give our listeners a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about so far
Mm-hmm.
and to think about
Yeah.
what one small change they can make
Yeah.
in their own lives
What one action can you take today?
to start being a more conscious spender.
Yeah. What's one small step
Yeah,
that you can take?
that you can take to move in that direction.
Absolutely.
So we'll give you a moment to think about that,
Mm.
and then we'll be back.
Okay. So that was a good moment to just kind of take a step back
Yeah,
and really think about those practical steps.
yeah. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired
I hope so too.
to make some changes in their own lives.
Yeah, because it's all about taking action. It's not enough to just listen to this and be like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you got to actually do something with it.
You got to put it into practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I guess kind of to recap everything we've talked about today,
Mm-hmm.
we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah,
But I think the key takeaway
yeah,
is that conscious spending is about empowerment.
yes.
It's not about deprivation.
I love that.
Yeah, it's about making choices that align with your values and goals.
Yeah, so you can create a life that is both fulfilling and financially secure.
Exactly.
And I think it's also about recognizing that every spending decision is a vote
Ooh,
for the kind of world that you want to live in.
that's powerful.
Yeah, because when you're spending money, you're supporting businesses.
Right?
You're supporting industries.
You're supporting values.
You're supporting values.
Yeah,
And so if you're not intentional about where your money is going,
right.
then you're essentially giving your power away.
You're letting other people decide
Exactly.
what you value.
So it's about taking back that power
Absolutely.
and making those conscious choices.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought,
Okay.
which is to remember that small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so don't get overwhelmed
No,
trying
no.
to do everything at once.
Yeah.
Just pick one thing,
Yeah. What's one small change
one small change
that you can make today?
that you can make today to start being a more conscious spender.
Yeah. It could be anything.
Yeah, it could be unsubscribing from a tempting email list.
Yeah.
It could be setting a budget for online shopping.
Right.
It could be making a list of your values.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
It could be taking a pause before you make a purchase.
Yeah, just one small step
One small step
in the right direction.
in the right direction.
And so I guess that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
But this is a conversation that I think we could continue for hours.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
There's so much more to say.
There is, but hopefully this has given our listeners a
Yeah.
good foundation,
A good starting point.
a good starting point to start thinking about their own spending habits.
Absolutely.
And to start making some changes.
Yeah.
And so, as always, we'll have links to all the resources that we mentioned
Yep.
in the show notes.
We'll be posting that free workbook
Yes, the free workbook with all those tips and exercises,
Yeah,
and the curated list of books and podcasts and articles.
absolutely.
And so if you're feeling inspired to learn more,
Yeah,
definitely check those out.
dive deeper.
Dive deeper.
Yeah.
And so with that, I want to thank our amazing expert.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
It's been fun.
And to our incredible listeners,
Yes, thank you for listening.
thank you for joining us on this deep dive into conscious spending.
Until next time.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.